But I think the mic's working. Happy. I'm gonna read some of the work at your have it. My face. We're gonna hope my mic for I just realized how horrible man. Right? You've been going on deep. So hopefully. Some stuff. Moving filters right now so that I'm at least some stuff. Yeah, my voice can be picked up much more better than before. So yeah, we have I don't have a physical copy of the books, sadly, but what I do have are ebook. I have ebooks downloaded like just yesterday, so hopefully, you know, we can have a nice time in this Halloween with some faux rain BGM while me trying to read some of, you know, some of Edgar Allan Poe's works. First, the first one we're gonna read is it's one of I have some history. Oh my god. I have some history with this a story because it's quite it's a funny story, but hello, hi. It's a funny story with me and Casca of Amontillado because we had a debate. We made our teacher made us do a debate on this, and it was a disaster, and I never want to do it again. Believe it or not, I ended up hating it. Anyways, without further ado, we're gonna read The Cask of Amontillado. Let me just drink some water first. The Cask of Amontillado. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as I best could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will now suppose, however, that I give utterance to a threat. At length, I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as much to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor by deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack, but in the matter of old wines he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening, during the supreme madness of the carnival season, that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-strip dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and belts. I was so pleased to see him, and I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for amontillado, and I have doubts." "How?" he said. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of the carnival." "I have my doubts," I replied, and was silly enough to pay the full amontillado price without consulting in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain. "Amontillado!" "I have my doubts." "Amontillado!" "And I must satisfy them." "Amontillado!" As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry, and yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match of your own. Come, let us go. Whither? To your vaults. My friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchesi, I have no engagement. Come, my friend. It is not an engagement, but the severe cold of which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre. Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you have been imposed upon, and as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado. Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a requeliere closely about my person, and I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. I am sorry for butchering any Italian terms. It's been a long while since I read the story. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in the honor of the time. I had told them I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconce 2 flambeaux, and gave one to Fortunato, bowed him throughout several suites of room to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bell upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe," he said. "It is farther on," I said, "but observe the white webworks which gleams from the cavern walls." He turned towards me and looked into my eyes with two filmy orbs that distilled the rue of intoxication. "Nature?" he asked at length. "Nature. Or nitre. I don't know." "How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision. "We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich and respected, admired, beloved. You're happy as once I was. You're a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi." "Enough," he said. "Cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." "True, true," I replied, "and indeed I had no intentions of alarming you unnecessarily. But you should use all proper caution. A draught of this medoc will defend us from the damps." Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. I raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the bird that reposed around us, and I to your long life." He again took my arm and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montresors," I replied. "We're a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms." "A human foot, door, and field azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant, those fangs are embedded in the hill." "And the motto?" "Nemo me impune lacessit." "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the medoc. We had passed through the walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. "The nature!" I said. "See, it increases, it hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed, and drops of moisture trickled among the bones. Come, we will go back ere it is too late. Your cough." "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on, but first another draught of the medoc." I broke and reached him a flagon of the Grave. He emptied it with a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend?" he said. "Not I," I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How?" "You are not of the Masons." "Yes, yes," I said. "Yes, yes. You?" "Impossible!" "A Mason?" "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my reculeire. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt, in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeau rather to glow than a flame. At the most remote end of this crypt, there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead. In the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris, 3 sides of his interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the walls, thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceive a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seems to have been constructed for no especial use in itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal support of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination of the feeble light did not enable to see us. "Proceed," I said. "Here in this Amontillado, as for Lucchesi, he is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, among the other was a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand," I said. "Over the wall, you cannot help feeling the nature. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return." "No? Then I must positively leave you. But I must first render you with all the little attentions in my power." "The Amontillado!" ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I replied, "the Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself upon the pile of bones of which I have before spoken, throwing them aside as soon as I uncovered the quantity of building stones and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of my masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the 2nd tier, and the 3rd, and the 4th, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which that I might hearken to it with the more satisfaction. I ceased my labor and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th tier. The wall was now nearly upon the level of my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the masonwork, I threw a feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams bursted suddenly in the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess. But the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed, I aided, I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight, and the task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished the portion of the last and 11th. There remained but the single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came from out of the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato, and said, "A very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. We'll have many rich laugh about in the palazzo. Over our wine. The amontillado," he said. I said, "Yes, the amontillado. But it is not getting late. Will they not be awaiting for us in the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said. "Let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montresor." "Yes," I said, "for the love of God." But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again, "Fortunato!" No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick, on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half of the century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace, requisite. Well, what a story. This is like this thing. I read this thing a lot because it's like a topic in one of my English class when we were in high school. And one thing about it is that our teacher made us do a debate. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm sorry for like some of the fumbling. It's been a long time since I like read aloud things, as one does. But it's a nice exercise, I guess. But yeah, it's quite. I have like a similar funny history because we have to. Basically, the debate was one will be defending Fortunato, the one who murdered the dude who wants the amontillado, and I was the one who I was like the researcher for defending his murder. So yeah, it sucked. I was so stressed about that the one who was like my little mouthpiece fumbled so hard that at the back of the stage thing that they were debating, I was so close to pulling out all my hairs because they can't do it right and they fumbled so hard. I'm like so embarrassed with myself. But anyways, it's a really nice story. And the next one, I wonder what's next. I'm gonna do like the shorter ones, of course, because it's we're gonna do let me just put it on the text, and I hope you're having a good time. I'm sorry. Next one is black. A little bit closer. Yeah, the black cat. Gosh, it's kind of cold today. I have to wake up like 6 a.m. in the morning I have to do some stuff. And it's insane. Good thing I never felt I didn't take a nap today. Well, I did. But not at this time. Alright. Now we have the black cat. Let me just drink another more water. The black cat. For the most wild, yet most homely narrative which I am about to pen, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet mad am I not, and very surely I do not dream. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburthen my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world, plainly, succinctly, and without comment, a series of mere household events and their consequences. These events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me. Yet I will not attempt to expound them. To me, they have presented little but horror. To many, they will seem less terrible than Baroque's. Hereafter, perhaps some intellect may be found which will be reduced my phantasm to the commonplace, some intellect more calm, more logical, and far less excitable than my own, which will perceive in the circumstance I detail with awe nothing more than an ordinary successions of very natural causes and effects. From my infancy, I was noted for the docility of humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I was especially fond of animals and was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. With this, I spent most of the time and was never so happy as when feeding and caressing them. This peculiarity of character grew with my growth, and with my manhood, I derived from it one of my principal sources of pleasure. To those who have cherished an affection of a faithful and sagacious dog, I need hardly to be at the trouble of explaining the nature or the intensity of the gratifications thus derivable. There is something in the unselfish and the self-sacrificing love of a brute, which goes directly to the heart of him who has had frequent occasions to test the paltry friendship and the gossamer fidelity of a mere man. I married early, and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. Observing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring those of most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. This latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black and sagacious to an astonishing degree. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with superstition, made a frequent allusion to the ancient popular notion, which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon this point, and I mentioned the matter at all for no better reason than that it happens just now to be remembered. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me wherever I went about the house, and it was even with difficulty that I could prevent him from following me through the streets. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, through the instrumentality of a fiend intemperance, had, and I blush to confess it, experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, or regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered myself to use intemperate language to my wife. At length, I even offered her personal violence. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected but ill-used. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, as I made no scruple of maltreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog when by accident or through my affection. They came in my way, but my disease grew on. For what disease is like alcohol? And at length even Pluto, who was now becoming old and consequently somewhat peevish, even Pluto had experienced the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home, much intoxicated, one of my haunts about town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him, when in his fright of my violence, he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with its teeth. The fury of the demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take its flight of my body, and more than a fiendish malevolence, a gin-nurtured thrilled every fiber of my frame. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. I blushed, I burned, I shuddered, while I penned the damnable atrocity. Hold on, let me just put a trigger warning on this. I forgot this story is quite violent. Yikes, I'm sorry. Let's see. Yeah, no, probably gore. Yes. Well, I mean, it's an Edgar Allan Poe story. This is how you I mean this is the summary. Those are the summary. Just put it here. Actually, here. There we go. When the reason I returned with the morning, let's gonna go back. With the morning, when it slept out the fumes of the night's debauch, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse, for the crime of which I had been guilty. But it was at best a feeble and equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I again plunged into excess, and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented, it is true, a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but as might be expected, fled in extreme terror at my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to be the first grieved by the evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. But this feeling soon gave place to irritation, and then came as if to my final and irrevocable overthrow, the spirit of perverseness. Of this spirit philosophy takes no account, yet I am not more sure that my soul lives than I am that the perverseness is one of the primitive impulses of the human heart, one of the indivisible primary faculties or sentiments which give direction to the character of man. Who has not 100 times found himself committing a vile or a silly action for no other than because he knows he should not? Have we not a perpetual inclination with the teeth of our best judgment to violate that which is law merely because we understand it to be such? The spirit of perverseness, I say, came to my final overthrow. It was the unfathomable longing of the soul to vex itself, to offer violence on its known nature, to do wrong for wrong's sakes only, that urged me to continue and finally to consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the unoffending brute. One morning, in cool blood, I slipped the noose about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree, hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse at my heart, hung it because I knew it had loved me and because I felt it had given me no reason of offense, hung it because I knew that in doing so I was committing a sin, a deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of an infinite mercy of the most merciful and the most terrible God. On the night of the day on which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing, and it was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the conflagration. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself thenceforward to despair. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect between the disaster and the atrocity, but I am detailing a chain of facts, in which not to leave even a possible link imperfect. On the day succeeding of the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found in a compartment wall, not very thick, which stood about the middle of the house, and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plastering had here, in great measure, resisted the action of the fire, a fact which I attributed of its having been recently spread. About this wall, a dense crowd were collected, and many persons seemed to be examining particular portions of it with very minute and eager attention. The words strange, singular, and other similar expression visited my curiosity. I approached and saw, as if graven in bas relief upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. The impression was given with an accuracy truly marvelous. There was a rope around the animal's neck. When I first beheld this apparition, for I could only scarcely regard it as less, my wonder and my terror was extreme. But at length reflection came to my aid. The cat, I remembered, had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. Upon the alarm of fire, this garden had been immediately filled by the crowd, with some of whom the animal must have been cut from the tree and thrown through my open window into my chamber. This had been probably done with the view of arousing me from sleep. The falling of other walls had compressed the victim of my cruelty into the substance of a freshly spread plaster, the lime of which, with the flames and the ammonia from the carcass, had then accomplished the portraiture as I saw it. Although I thus readily accustomed to my reason, if not altogether to my conscience, for the startling fact just detailed, it did not last fail to make a deep impression upon my fancy. For months I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat, and during this period there came back into my spirit a half sentiment that seemed but was not remorse. I went so far to regret the loss of the animal and to look about me among the vile haunts of which I now habitually frequented, for another pet of the same species and of somewhat similar appearance with which to supply its place. One night as I sat half stupefied in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object, reposing upon the head of one of the immense hogsheads of gin, of rum, which constituted the chief furniture of the apartment. I had been looking steadily at the top of this hogshead for some minutes, and what now caused me surprise was the fact that I had not sooner perceived the object thereupon. I approached it, and touched it with my hand. It was a black cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto, and closely resembling him in every aspect but one. Pluto had not had a white hair upon any portion of his body, but this cat had a large, although indefinite splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search. I at once offered to purchase it with the landlord, but this person made no claim to it, knew nothing of it, had never seen it before. I continued my caress, and when I prepared to go home, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so, occasionally stooping and patting it as I proceeded. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once, and became immediately a great favorite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated, but I know not why it was. It is evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed. By slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature, a certain sense of shame and the remembrance of my former deed of cruelty preventing me from physically abusing it. I did not for some weeks strike or otherwise violently ill use of it. But gradually, very gradually, I came to look upon it with unutterable loathing, and to flee silently from his audacious presence, as from the breath of a pestilence. What added, no doubt, to my hatred of the beast was the discovery on the morning after I brought it home, that, like Pluto, it also had been deprived of one of its eyes. This circumstance, however, only endeared it to my wife, who, as I have already said, possessed in a higher degree that humanity of feeling which had once been my distinguishing trait, and the source of many of my simplest and purest pleasure. With my aversion to this cat, however, its partiality for myself seemed to increase. It followed my footsteps with a pertinacity which it would be difficult to make the reader comprehend. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet and thus nearly throw me down, or fastening its long sharp claws in my dress, clamber in this manner to my breast, such as times, although I know I longed to destroy it with a blow, I was yet withheld from doing so, partly by a memory of my former crime, but chiefly, let me confess it at once, my absolute dread of the beast. This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, and yet I should be at loss how otherwise to define it. I am most ashamed to my own, yes, even in this felon's cell, I am most ashamed to my own. I'm almost ashamed to own that the terror and horror with which the animal inspired me had been heightened by one of the merest chimeras it would be possible to conceive. Excuse me, sorry. My wife had called my attention more than once to the mark of the white hair of which I had spoken, and which constituted a sole visible difference between the strange beast and one I had destroyed. The reader will remember that this mark, although large and had been originally very indefinite, but slow, degrees by degrees, or degree by degree, nearly imperceptible, and which for a long time my reason struggled to reject as fanciful. It had at length assumed a rigorous distinctness of outline, and it was now the representation of the object that I shuddered to name, and for this, above all, I loathed and dread, and I would have rid of myself of the monster had I dared as it now. I say the images of the hideous, of the ghastly thing, of the gallows. O mournful and terrible engine of horror, and of crime, of agony, and of death. And now I had indeed wretched beyond the wretchedness of mere humanity, and a brute beast whose fellow I had contemptuously destroyed, a brute beast to work out for me, for me a man fashioned in the image of the high God. So much of insufferable woe, alas, neither by day nor by night knew I had blessing of rest any more. During the former, the creature left me no moment alone, and in the latter I started hourly of dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face, and its vast weight, an incarnate nightmare that I had no power to shake off incumbent internally upon my heart. Beneath the pressure of torment such as these, the feeble remnant of the good within me succumbed. Evil thoughts became my sole intimates, the darkest, the most evil thoughts. The moodiness of my usual temper increased to hatred of all things and of all mankind, while from the sudden, frequent, and ungovernable outburst of fear to which I now blindly abandoned myself, my uncomplaining wife, alas, was the most usual and the most patient of sufferers. One day, she accompanied me upon some household errand of food to the cellar of the old building which our poverty compelled us to inhabit. The cat followed me down the steep stairs, and nearly throwing me headlong, exasperated me to madness. Uplifting an axe and forgetting in my wrath the childish dread which had hitherto stayed my hand, I aimed a blow at the animal, which of course would have been proved instantly fatal had it descended as I wished. But this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife, goaded by an interference into the rage more than demoniacal. I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brain. She fell dead upon the spot without a groan. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith, and with entire deliberation, to the task of concealing the body. I knew that I could not remove it from the house, either by day or by night, without the risk of being observed by the neighbors. Many projects entered my mind, and at one period I thought by cutting the corpse into minute fragments and destroying them by fire. At another, I resolved to dig a grave for it in the floor of the cellar. Again, I deliberated about casting it in the well in the yard, about packing it in a box as if merchandise with the usual arrangements, and so getting a porter to take it from the house. Finally, I hit... Sorry, just moved the thing. Finally, I hit upon what I considered far better expedient than either of these. I determined to wall it up to the cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages have recorded to have walled up their victims. For a purpose of which as the cellar was well adapted, its walls were loosely constructed and had lately been plastered throughout with rough plaster, which the dampness of the atmosphere had been prevented from the hardening. Moreover, in one of those walls was a projection, caused by a fall chimney or fireplace that had been filled up, and made to resemble the red of the cellar, which I made no doubt that I could readily displace the bricks at this point, insert the corpse and wall the whole up as before, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious, and in this calculation I was not deceived. By means of a crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully disposed the body against the inner wall, I dropped it in that position, while with little trouble I relaid the whole structure and its originally stood. Having procured mortar, sand, and hair with every possible precaution, I prepared a plaster with which I could not be distinguished from the old, and with this I very carefully went over the new brickwork. Then I had finished, and felt satisfied that all was right. The wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. The rubbish on the floor had picked with the minutest care. I looked around triumphantly and said to myself, "Here it is then, my labor had not been in vain." The next step was to look at the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness, for I had at length firmly resolved to put it to death. Had I been able to meet with it at the moment, there could have been no doubts of its fate, but it appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger, and forbore to present itself in my present mood. It is impossible to describe or to imagine the deep and blissful sense of relief which the absence of the detested creature occasioned in my bosom. It did not make its appearance during the night, and thus, for one night at least since its introduction into the house, I soundly and tranquilly slept. I slept even within the burden of murder upon my soul. Yikes. The second and third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again I breathed as a free man. The monster in terror had fled the premises forever. I should uphold it no more. My happiness supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Some few inquiries had been made, but these had been readily answered, even as a search had been instituted. But of course nothing was to be discovered. I looked upon my future felicity was secured. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of the police came, and very unexpectedly, into the house, and proceeded again to make rigorous investigation of the premise. Secure, however, in the inscrutably of my place of concealment, I felt no embarrassment whatever, though the officers bade me accompany them in their search. They left no nook or corner unexplored. At length, for the third and fourth time, they descended into the cellar. I quivered not in a muscle. My heart beat calmly as that one of whose slumbers in innocence. I walked the cellar from end to end, folded my arms upon my bosom, and roamed easily to and fro, and the police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. The glee at my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burdened to say, if but one word, by the way of triumph, and to render doubly their assurance of my guiltlessness. "Gentlemen," I said at last as the party ascended the step, "I delight to have allayed your suspicions. I wish you all health and a little more courtesy. By the by, then, gentlemen, this is a very well constructed house." And the rabbit desired to say something easily. I scarcely knew what I uttered at all. "I may say an excellently well constructed house. These walls, are you going, gentlemen? These walls are solidly put together, and here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily, with the cane which I held in my hand, upon the very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of my wife in my bosom. But may God shield and deliver me from the fangs of the arch-fiend. No sooner had the reverberation of my blows sunk into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb, by a cry, at first muffled and broken, like the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, continuous scream. Utterly anomalous and inhuman. A howl, a wailing shriek, half of horror and half of triumph, which as might have arisen only out of hell, conjointly, and from the throats of the damned in their agony, and of the demons then exult in the detonation. Of one of my own thoughts, it is falling to speak. Swooning, I staggered in the opposite wall. For one instant, the party upon the stairs remained motionless, through the extremity of terror and of awe. In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. It fell bodily. The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head, with red extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder, and whose informing voice had consigned me to a hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb. Jesus Christ. I forgot how fucked up that story was. Yikes. Gosh, just reading it is fucking annoying. It's annoying the living shit out of me. Anywho, yeah, that was the black cat. That was the black cat. It was real. I forgot like how violent that story is. But yeah, that's like I think it's like alcoholism, but especially with if you know like the life story of Edgar Allan Poe, there is a lot of like topics involving alcoholism because he is an alcoholic himself. But sometimes I do wonder, like with this, with the, like the black cat, it's either you could either say that is it really a witch in that? Is it really are the black cats or those two black cats, or even if it's just one black cat, is actually a witch who's like tormenting him and such that drove him into madness, or he is just due to alcoholism drove himself mad, you know? But yeah, it's really fucked up story. We're gonna get even more fucked up. Yeah, I'm slowly fumbling. Jesus Christ, I think it's been a long time since I've been streaming. That my like immunity, or no, my resistance to talk long periods of time has been like slowly diminished. But hey, if we keep on going, we're gonna have it's gonna be good. It's gonna go better. Go back to the usual. What's next? Oh yeah, this one. This one I also like this one. Hold on, let me just my nose. Also, yeah, I look quite dark right now because I have to put like I have to like figure out like how to make it a little bit cozy, a little bit darker. But you know. Gosh. There we go. The next one is another fave of mine. It's a really fun story. In my opinion. The way it was written is I really enjoyed it a lot. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Anyway, third one is the Telltale Heart. I have to prepare. Hold on, let me just prepare for this one, just because this one's a doozy. This one's a doozy. Anyways, one, the Telltale Heart. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and in earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved that old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture. A pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, thus rid myself the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh so gently, and then when I had made an opening sufficiently for my head, I had put in a dark lantern, all closed that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. And you have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust in. I moved it slowly, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinge creaked. I undid it so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight, I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So, you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. I watched his minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before did the night I had felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph, to think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. You may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with its thick darkness, for the shutters were closed, fastened to the fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and kept pushing it on steadily and steadily. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the thin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches on the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan. I knew the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh no! It was the low, stifled muffled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound of it well. Many a night just at midnight when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo, terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well when I knew what the old man felt and pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart, I knew he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had ever been since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor. Or it is merely a cricket which has been made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions. But he had found it all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him, and enveloped the victim, and it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was wide open. It was open wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. Where am I? I saw it with perfect distinctness. All the dull blue, with the hideous veil over it, was chilled the very marrow of my bones, but I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct precisely upon the damned spot. And have I not told you that you mistake for madness is but over acuteness of the sense? Now, I say there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes me when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too, and was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, and the beating of the drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless and tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eve. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder at every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as it excited to uncontrollable terror, yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder, I thought, and the heart must burst, and now the new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by the neighbor, and the old man's hour had come. With a loud yell I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant I dragged him to the floor, pulled the heavy bed over him, then I smiled gaily to find the deed so far done, but for so many minutes the heart beat on a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased, and the old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse, yet he was a stone dead. I placed my hand upon my heart and held it there many minutes, and there was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eyes would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, You will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned and I worked hastily but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, the arms, and the legs. Then I took up 3 planks of the flooring of the chambers and deposited it all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught it all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there would come a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with great suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged by the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premise. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed, in the enthusiasm of my confidence. I brought chairs into the room and decided them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of my victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied the ringing of my ears, but still they sat and chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued to become more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but continued and gained definiteness, until at length I found the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more frequently and had heightened voice, and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased. It's like quite late for me, but I just want to say hi and like the video. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a nice rest. More vehemently, the officer heard it not, and I talked more quickly, more vehemently. But the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles with a high key and with violent gesticulation, but the noise steadily increased. What would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy stride, as if excited to fury by observations of the man. But the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose overall and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the man chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think, but anything was better than any agony, and better than this agony. Anything was more terrible than this derision. I could bear more hypocritical smile no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark! Louder, 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 louder. Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here is the beating of his hideous heart. Each. The end. Yikes. I can, gosh, you know what? No matter what, how much I've read that story, I still fucking love it. The way that the narrator is just like like in constant and anxious state and like paranoia and still denying that he's like mad or something is really really fucking good. And one thing, some things I do wonder, it's like if like the telltale heart isn't like a literal like a beating heart that only him that hears it, but it's more likely the heart is like his guilt, egging him on to like tell the truth of the crime he's done or something like that. You know, just like when you do something wrong and you come to your senses of doing something, and it's basically it's your guilty conscience that only you could hear, and that when you can bear it no longer to like hide it or tell that certain lie, you just burst into like this you go crazy about it, and then you spill the beans on you tell on yourself. That's what I think, that like that's my interpretation for that story, which I just made upon like a close reading right now, because I've read this for a very long time. I read of these things for a very long time, which I have different brains, a different brain, when I was much more younger. But yeah, that's the telltale heart. What's next? Gosh, this is so weird. I had this reading app back then in my old phone, but I never really used it to read. I just used it to like get like get stuff from it, because they have like this library thingy, and that's where I find like classic old books. Yeah. I wonder what's next. You know what? Let's do this. Gosh, what a fitting you're gonna get a little spooky in this household. The next one is something I actually haven't read this, but I've heard of it back then. Number 4 is the fuck. Sorry, the fuck is the pit. Coughing and like my nose is stuffy. I don't know how to figure it out. It's just my nerves being like my nerves being my nerves, basically. So I'm sorry. Anywho, you have the pit and the pendulum. Should I read this? Should I read this Latin thing? Because there's a Latin quatrain. Yeah, let's do it. Impia, the pit and the pendulum. Impia tortorum longus hic turba furores, sanguinis innocui non satia aluit. Suspite nunc patria, fracto nunc funeris antro. Mors ubi dira fuit vita, salisque patent. quatrain composed for the gates of a market to be erected upon the site of Jacobin Clubhouse at Paris. Oh god, this is quite long. Like apparently 22 pages. Oh shit. We're gonna be here for a very long time, folks. So here's the pit and the pendulum. I was sick unto the death with that long agony, and when they at length unbound me, and I was permitted to sit, I felt that my senses were leaving me. The dread sentence of death, was at the last of distinct accentuation which reached my ears. After that, the sound of the inquisitorial voices seemed merged in one dreamy, indeterminate hum. It conveyed to my soul the idea of revolution, perhaps from its association in fancy with the burr of a mill wheel. This only for a brief period, for presently I heard no more. Yet, for a while, I saw. But how terrible an exaggeration! I saw the lips of the black-robed judges. They appeared to be whiter than the sheet upon which I traced these words, and thin even to grotesqueness. Thin with the intensity of their expression, of firmness, of immovable resolution, of stern contempt of human torture. I saw that the decrees of what to me was fate were still issuing from those lips. I saw them writhe with a deadly locution. I saw them fashion the syllables of my name, and I shuddered because no sound succeeded. I saw, too, for a few moments of delirious horror, and soft, nearly imperceptible waving of the sable draperies of which enwrapped the walls of the apartment, and then my vision fell upon 7 tall candles upon the table. At first they wore the aspect of charity, and seemed white and slender. Angel who could save me. But then all at once there came the most deadly nausea over my spirit, and I felt every fibre of my frame thrill, as I had touched the wire of the galvanic battery, while the angel forms became meaningless spectres. This head of flame, and I saw that from them there would be no help. And then there stole into my fancy, like a rich musical note, and thought of the sweet rest there must be in the grave. The thought came gently and stealthily, and it seemed long before I attained full appreciation. But just as my spirit came at length properly to feel and entertain it, the figures of the judges vanished, and as if magically from before me, the tall candles sank into nothingness. Their flame went out utterly in blackness of darkness supervened. All sensations appeared swallowed up in a mad, rushing descent, as of the soul sink to Hades, then silence and stillness, night with the universe. I had swooned, but still will not say that all of consciousness was lost. What of it there remained, I will not attempt to define, or even to describe, yet all was not lost. In the deepest slumber, no. In delirium, no. In a swoon, no. In death, no. Even in the grave, all is not lost. Else there is no immortality for man. Arousing from the most profound of slumbers, we break the gossamer web of some dream. Yet in the second afterward, so frail that may the web have been, we remember not that we have dreamed in the return of life. From the swoon, there are 2 stages. First, that of the sense of mental or spiritual. Secondly, that of the sense of physical existence. It seemed probable that if, upon reaching the second stage, we could recall the impressions of the first, we should find these impressions eloquent in memories of the gulf beyond. And that gulf is what? How at least do we distinguish its shadows from those of the tomb? But if the impression of what have termed the first stage are not at will recalled, yet after a long interval, do they not become unbidden while we marvel whence they come? He who has never swooned is not he who finds strange palaces and wildly familiar faces in coals that glow. It is not he who beholds floating in mid-air the sad visions that many may not view. It is not he who ponders over the perfume of some novel flower. It's not whose brain power bewildered with the meaning of some musical cadence which has never before arrested his attention. Amid frequent thoughtful endeavors to remember, amid in earnest struggles to regather some token of a state of seeming nothingness into which my soul had lapsed, there had been moments that I have been dreamed of success. There have been brief, very brief periods which have conjured up remembrances which lucid reasons of a latter epoch assures me could have been reference only to that condition of seeming unconsciousness. These shadows of memory tell indistinctly of tall figures that have lifted, bore me in silence down, down still, down till its hideous stillness, dizziness oppressed me, the mere idea of the interminableness of the descent. They tell also a vague horror at my heart, an account that heart's unnatural stillness. Then comes a sense of and sudden motionlessness throughout all things, as if those who bore me, a ghastly train, had outrun in the descent the limits of the limitless, and paused from the wearisomeness of their toil, and after I call to mind flatness and dampness, and then all is madness, the madness of a memory which busies itself among forbidden things. Very suddenly there came back to my soul motion and sound, the tumultuous motion of the heart, and in my ears the sound of its beating. Then a pause in which all is blank, then again sound and motion and touch, a tingling sensation pervading my frame. Then the mere consciousness of existence, without a thought, a condition which lasted long. Then, very suddenly, thought and shuddering terror, the earnest endeavor to comprehend my true state. Then a strong desire to lapse into insensibility. Then a rushing revival of soul and a successful effort to move, and now a full memory of the trial, and of the judges, of the sable draperies of the sentence, of the sickness and of the swoon. There, and then entirely forgetfulness of all that followed. Of all that a later day and much earnestness of endeavor had been enabled me to vaguely recall. So far I had not opened my eyes. I felt that I lay upon my back outbound. I reached out of my hand and felt heavily upon something damp and hard. There I suffered it to remain for many minutes, while I strove to imagine where and what I could be. I longed yet dared not to implore my vision. I dread that the first glance of objects around me, it was not that I feared to look upon things horrible, but I grew aghast lest there should be nothing to see. At length, with a wild desperation of heart, I quickly unclosed my eyes. My worst thought then were confirmed. The blackness of eternal night encompassed me. I struggled for breath, and the intensity of the darkness seemed to oppress and stifle me. The atmosphere was intolerably close, and I still lay quietly and made effort to exercise my reason. I brought to mind inquisitorial proceedings, and attempted from that point to deduce my real condition. The sentence had passed, and it appeared to me that the very long interval of times had since elapsed. Yet, for a moment I did not suppose myself actually dead. Such a supposition, notwithstanding what read in fiction, is altogether inconsistent with real existence. But where and what state was I? The condemned to death I knew perish usually at the autos de fe. And one of these had been held on the very night of the day of my trial. Had I been remanded to my dungeon to await the next sacrifice, which would not take place for many months. This I at once saw could not be. Victims had been in immediate demand. Moreover, my dungeon, as well as the condemned selves of Toledo, had stone floors and light was not altogether excluded. Yeah, so it's still at page 5, by the way. Okay. I'm gonna finish this, okay. A fearful idea now suddenly drove the blood in torrents upon my heart in a brief period. I once more relapsed into sensibility. Upon recovering, I at once started to my feet, trembling convulsively in every fibre. I thrust my arms wildly above and around me in all directions. I felt nothing, yet dreaded to move a step, lest I should be impeded by the walls of a tomb. Perspiration burst from every pore and stood in cold big beads upon my forehead. The agony of suspense grew at length intolerable, and I cautiously moved forward with my arms extended and my eyes straining from their sockets in the hope of catching some faint ray of light. I proceeded for many paces, but still was blackness and vacancy. I breathed more freely. It seemed evident that mine was not, at least, the most hideous of fates. And now, as I still continued to step cautiously onward, there came thronging upon my recollection of thousand big rumors the horrors of Toledo. Toledo. Of the dungeons there had been strange things narrated. Fables I had always deemed them, but yet strange. And that too ghastly to repeat, save in a whisper. Was I left to perish of starvation in this subterranean world of darkness? Or what fate perhaps even more fearful awaited me? That the result would be death, and a death of more than customary bitterness. I knew too well that the character of my judges to doubt, the mode and the hour were all that occupied or distracted me. My outstretched hand at length encountered some solid obstruction. It was a wall, and seemingly of stone masonry, very smooth, slimy, and cold. I followed it up, stepping with all the careful distrust with which certain antique narratives had inspired me. This process, however, afforded me no means of ascertaining the dimensions of my dungeon, as I might make its circuit and return to the point whence I set out, without being aware of the fact. So perfectly uniform seemed the wall. I therefore sought the knife which had been in my pocket when led into the inquisitorial chamber, but it was gone. My clothes had been exchanged for a wrapper of coarse serge. I thought of forcing the blade in some minute crevice of the masonry so as to identify the point of departure. The difficulty, nevertheless, was but trivial, although in the disorder of my fancy, it seemed that at first insuperable. I tore a part of the hem from the robe and displaced the fragment at full length. And at right angles to the wall, in groping my way around the prison, I could not fail to encounter this rag was completing the circuit. So at least, I thought, but I had not counted upon the extent of the dungeon, or upon my own weakness. The ground was moist and slippery. I staggered onward for some time. When I stumbled and fell, my excessive fatigue induced me to remain prostrate, and sleep soon overtook me as I lay. Upon awaking, the stretching forth an arm, I found beside me a loaf and a pitcher with water. I was too much exhausted to reflect upon this circumstance, but ate and drank with avidity. Shortly afterward, I resumed my tour around the prison, with which much toil came at last, and upon the fragment of my search, up to the period when I fell, I had counted 52 paces, and upon resuming my walk, I had counted 48 more, when I arrived at the rag. There were in all, then, 100 paces, and admitting 2 paces to the yard, I presumed the dungeon to be 50 yards in circuit. I had met, however, with many angles of the wall, and thus could form no guess at the shape of the vault, for vault I could not help supposing it to be. I had little object certainly no hope in these researches, but a vague curiosity prompted me to continue them. Quitting the wall, I resolved to cross the area from the enclosure. At first, I proceeded with extreme caution to the floor, although seemingly of solid material, was treacherous with slime. At length, however, I took courage and did not hesitate to step firmly, endeavoring to cross as indirect as a line as possible. I had advanced some 10 to 12 paces in this manner, then the remnant of the torn hem of my robe became entangled between my legs, and I stepped on it and fell violently on my face. In the confusion attending my fall, I did not immediately apprehend a somewhat startling circumstance, which yet in a few seconds afterwards, and while I lay prostrate, arrested my attention. It was this. My chin rested upon the floor of the prison, but my lips and my upper portion of my head, although seemingly at less elevation than my chin, touched nothing. At the same time, my forehead seemed bathed in clammy vapor, and the peculiar smell of decayed fungus arose to my nostril. I put forward my arm and shuddered to find that I had fallen at the very brink of the circular pit, whose extent, of course, I had no means of ascertaining at the moment. Groping about the masonry just below the margin, I succeeded in dislodging a small fragment and let it fall into the abyss. For many seconds I hearkened to its reverberations as it dashed against the side of the chasm in its descent. At length there was a sudden plunge into water, sudden succeeded by loud echoes. At the same moment there came a sound resembling the quick opening and rapid closing of a door overhead. With a faint gleam of light flashed suddenly through the gloom, as suddenly fading away. I saw... Oh my god. So dark. Too dark. I saw clearly the doom which had been prepared for me, and congratulated myself upon the timely accident by which I had escaped. Another step before my fall, the world had seen me no more, and the death just avoided. And that was that of very character which had been regarded as fabulous and frivolous as the tale respecting the Inquisition. To the victims of its tyranny, there was a choice of death with its direst physical agonies, or death with its most hideous moral horrors. I had been reserved for the latter, and by long suffering my nerves had been unstrung, which I trembled with the sound of my own voice, and had become in every aspect of a fitting subject for the species of torture which awaited me. Gosh, this is very long. Yikes. Well, let me just... Hopefully I won't talk the rest of the fucking night after this. Oh, I don't know. I might do my own makeup later. You know, I'm not going anywhere, I think. But you know, just for me to make myself feel good, you know, just to be in the mood of the Halloween. Anyways, let's continue. Shaking in every limb, I groped my way back to the wall, resolving there to perish rather than to risk the terrors of the wells, of which my imagination now pictured many in various positions about the dungeon. In other conditions of mind, I might have had courage to end my misery at once by the plunge into one of these abysses, but now I was the veriest of cowards. Neither could I forget that I had read of these pits, and the sudden extinction of life formed no part of their most horrible pain. Agitation of spirit kept me awake for many long hours, but at length I again slumbered. Upon arousing, I found by my side, as before, a loaf and a pitcher of water. A burning thirst consumed me and emptied the vessel at the draught, and had been drunk. It must have been drunk, for scarcely had I drunk before I became irresistibly drowsy, and deep sleep fell upon me, a sleep like that of death. How long it lasted, of course, I know not, but when once again I unclosed my eyes, the objects around me were visible by a wild surface luster, the origin of which I could not first determine, was unable to see me the extent and aspect of a prison. Hold on, let me just... I drank too much water. Let me just let me go somewhere. Go. Anyways, we're back. In its size, I had been greatly mistaken. The whole circuit of this wall did not extend 25 yards. For some minute, this fact occasioned for me a world of vain trouble. Vain indeed, for what it could be less importance, under the terrible circumstance which environed me, than the mere dimensions of my dungeon. But my soul took a wild interest in trifles, and busied myself in endeavors to account that of terror I had committed in my measurement. Truth at length flashed upon me, and with my first attempt at exploration, I had counted 52 paces, up to the period when I fell. I must then have been within a paces or two of the fragment of surge. This fact had nearly performed the circuit of the vault. Then, slept, and upon waking, I must have returned upon my steps, thus supposing the circuit nearly troubled that it actually was. My confusion of mind prevented me from observing that I began to tour with the left to the wall, and that ended it with the wall to the right. I had been deceived, too, in respect to the shape of the enclosure. In feeling my way, I had found many angles, thus induced an idea of great irregularity. So potent is the effect of darkness upon one arousing from lethargy or sleep. The angles were simply those of a few slight depressions or niche at odd intervals. The general shape of the prison was square. What I had taken for masonry seemed now to be iron or some other metal, and huge plates, with sutures or joints, occasioned the depression. And the entire surface of this metallic enclosure was rudely daubed, and all hideous repulsive devices to which the carnal superstition of the monks had given rise. The figures of fiends and aspect of menace with skeleton forms and other more really fearful images overspread the disfigured walls. I observed that the outlines of these monstrosities were sufficiently distinct, but that the colors seemed faded and blurred, as if from the effects of the damp atmosphere. I now noticed the floor, too, which was of stone, was now the centered yawn in the circular pit from those jaws I had escaped. But there was only one in the dungeon. Hold on. Where am I? Sorry, there was something just came up. Something just came up. Yes. Where am I? Let's see. All of this I saw indistinctly by much effort, for all my personal condition had been greatly changed during slumber. I now lay upon my back and at full length on a species of low framework of wood. To this I was securely bound to a long strap resembling a circling goal. It passed in many convolutions about my limbs and body, leaving at liberty only my head and my left arm to such extent that I could, by dint of much exertion, supply myself with food from an earthen dish which lay by side on the floor. I saw to my horror that the pitcher had been removed. I say to my horror, for I was consumed with intolerable thirst. This thirst, it appeared to be the design of my persecutors to stimulate, for the food in the dish was meat pungently seasoned. Looking upward, I surveyed the ceiling of my prison. Prison was some 30 or 40 feet overhead and constructed as much as the side walls. In one of its panels was a very singular figure riveted my whole attention. It was the painted figure of Time, as he is commonly presented, save that in lieu of a sight, he held what, a casual glance, is supposed to be a pictured image of a huge pendulum, such as we see on antique clocks. There was something, however, in the appearance of this machine which caused me to regard it more attentively, which I gazed directly upward at it, for its own position was immediately over my own. I fancied that I saw it in motion. In an instant afterwards, the fancy was confirmed. Its sweep was brief and of course slow. I watched it for some minutes, somewhat in fear, but more in wonder. Wearied at length with observing its dull movement, I turned my eyes upon the other objects in the cell. A slight noise attracted my notice, and looking at the floor, I saw several enormous rats traversing it. They had issued from the well which lay within view from my right. Even then, while I gazed, they came up in troops, hurriedly, and ravenous eyes allured by the scent of meat, and from its required much effort and attention to scare them away. It might have been a half hour, perhaps even an hour, for I could take but imperfect note of time, before I again cast my eyes upward. What I even saw confounded and amazed me. The sweep of the pendulum had increased in extent by nearly a yard. As much as a natural consequence, its velocity was also much greater. But what mainly disturbed me was for the idea that had perceptibly descended. I now observed with what horror it is needless to say, that its nether extremity was formed with a crescent of glittering steel about a foot in length from horn to horn, the horns upward and under edge evidently as keen as up of that razor. Like a razor also, it seems massy and heavy, tapering from the edge into a solid and broad structure above. It was appended to a weighty rod of brass, and the whole hissed as it swung into the air. I could no longer doubt the doom prepared for me by monkish ingenuity of torture. My cognizance of the pit had become known to the Inquisitor's agents. The pit, whose horrors had been destined for so bold a recusant as myself. The pit, typical hell and regarded by rumor as the ultima thule of all punishments, and the plunge into this pit had avoided by merest of accidents. I knew that surprise or entrapment into torment formed an important portion of all grotesquerie of the dungeon depths. Having failed to fall, it was no part of the demon plan to hurl me into the abyss, and thus, there being no alternative, a different and milder destruction awaited me. Milder! I half smiled in my agony as thought of such application of such matter. What boots it to tell the long hours of horror more than mortal, during which I counted the rushing vibrations of the steel, inch by inch, line by line, which should descend only appreciable at intervals that seemed ages. Down and still down it came. Days passed. It might have been that many days passed ere it swept closely over to me as to fan me of its acrid breath. The odor of the sharp steel forced itself into my nostrils. I prayed. I wearied heaven with my prayers for its more speedy descent. I grew frantically mad and struggled to force myself upwards against the sweep of the fearful scimitar. And then I fell suddenly calm. and laying smiley at the glittering death as a child at some rare bauble. It was another interval of utter insensibility. It was brief, for upon again lapsing into life, there had been no perceptible descent in the pendulum, but it never might have been long, for I knew there were demons who took note of my swoon. And who could have arrested the vibration of pleasure? Upon my recovery, too, I felt inexpressibly sick and weak, as if through long inanition, even amid agonies of that period, the human nature craved food. With painful effort, I outstretched my left arm as far as my bonds permitted, and took possession of the small remnant of which had been spared by the rats. As I put a portion of it in within my lips, I rushed to my mind a half-formed thought of joy and hope. Yet what business had I hope? It was, as I have formed thought, man has many such which are never completed. I felt that it was of joy, of hope, but felt that it had perished in its formation. In vain I struggled to regain it. Long suffering had nearly annihilated all my ordinary powers of mind. I was an imbecile, an idiot. The vibrations of the pendulum was at right angles to my length. I saw that the crescent was designed to cross the region of my heart. It would fray the surges of my robe, it would return and repeat its operations again and again, notwithstanding its terrifically wide sweep, some 3 feet more, and this hissing vigor of its descent, sufficient to sunder these very walls of iron. Still, the fraying of my robe would be all that. For several minutes it could accomplish at that, and that if this thought I paused, I dare not to go then with this reflection. I dwelt upon it with the pertinacity of attention, as if in so dwelling I could arrest the descent of the steel. I forced myself to ponder upon the sound of the crescent as it should pass across the garment, upon the peculiar thrilling sensation in which the friction of the cloth produces on the nerve. I pondered upon all this frivolity until my teeth were on the edge. Steadily down it crept. I took a frenzied pleasure in contrasting its downward with its lateral velocity. To the right, to the left, far and wide, with the shriek of the damned spirit, to my heart within the stealthy pace of a tiger. I alternately laughed and howled as for the one or the other idea grew predominant. Down, certainly, relentlessly down. It vibrated within 3 inches to my bosom. I struggled violently, furiously to free my left arm. It was free only for the elbow to the hand. I could reach the ladder from the platter beside me to my mouth with great effort, but to no farther. I could have broken the fastenings above my elbow, and would have seized an attempt to arrest the pendulum. I might as well have attempted to arrest an avalanche. Down still increasingly, still inevitably down. I gasped and struggled with each vibrations. I shrunk convulsively at its every sweep. My eyes followed it outward and upward whirls with the eagerness of the most unmeaning despair. They closed themselves spasmodically at the descent, although death could have been relief, oh how unspeakable. Still, I quivered in every nerve to think how slightly a sinking of the machinery could precipitate that keen, glistening axe upon my bosom. It was a hope that prompted me the nerve to quiver, the frame to shrink. It was hope, the hope that triumphs on the rack, that whispers to the death condemned even in the dungeons of the Inquisition. I saw that some 10 or 12 vibrations would bring the steel to actual contact with my robe. And with this observation, there suddenly came over my spirit all the keen collectedness, calmness and despair. For the first time during many hours, or perhaps days, I thought, it could now occur to me that the bandage, or circumgo, which had enveloped me was unique, was tied to no separate cord. The first struck the razor-like crescent athwart any portion of the band. would so detach it as it may be unwound from from my person by means of my left hand. But how fearful as it case the proximity of the steel. The result of this lightness struggle, how deadly. Was it likely, moreover, that the minions of the torturer had not foreseen and provided for this possibility? Was it probable that the bandage crossed my bosom in the track of the pendulum? Dreading to find my faint, and as it seemed my last hope frustrated, I so far elevated my head as to obtain a distinct view of my breast, and the circle enveloped my limbs and body close in all directions, save in the path of the destroying crescent. Yikes. Scarcely had I dropped my head back into its original position, when there flashed upon my mind what I cannot better describe than thus the unformed half the idea of deliverance to which I previously alluded, and of which I moistly only floated indeterminately through my brain when I raised food to my burning lips. The whole thought was now present, feeble, scarcely sane, scarcely definite, but still entire. I proceeded at once with the nervous energy of despair to attempt its execution. For many hours of immediate vicinity of the low framework upon which I had laid between, literally swarming with ants. They were wild, bold, ravenous, their red eyes glaring upon me as if they waited but for motionlessness on my part to make me their prey. To what food, I thought? Have they been accustomed in the well? They had devoured in spite of all my efforts to prevent them. All but the remnants of the contents of the dish had fallen into a habitual seesaw, or wave of the hand waved the hand about the platter, and at length the unconscious uniformity of the movement deprived of its effect. In their voracity, the vermins frequently fastened their sharp fangs in my fingers. With the particles of the oily and spicy viand which now remained, I thoroughly rubbed the bandage wherever I could reach it, and then raising my hand from the floor, I lay breathlessly still. At first the ravenous animals were startled and terrified of the change. At the cessation of the movement, they shrank alarmed back, and many sought the well, but this was only for a moment. I was not counted in vain upon their voracity. Observing, I remained without motion. One or two of the boldest leaped upon the framework and smote the circumgle. This seemed the signal upon the general rush. Forth from the well they hurried in fresh troops. They clung to the wood, they overran it, they leaped in hundreds upon my person, and their measured movement along the pendulum disturbed them not at all. Avoiding its strokes, they busied themselves into the anointed bandage. They pressed, they swarmed upon me with the accumulating heaps. They writhed upon my throat. Their cold lips sought my own. I was half stifled by their thronging pressure. Disgust for which the world has no name swelled my bosom and chilled, with a very heavy clamminess, my heart. Yet 1 minute, and I felt the struggle would be over. Plainly I perceived the loosening of the bandage. I knew that in more than one place it must be already severed. With the more than a human resolution, I lay still. Nor I had heard my calculations, nor had I endured in vain. I at length felt that I was free. The circumgle hung in ribbons from my body, but the stroke of the pendulum heavily pressed upon my bosom. It dived the surge of the robe. It had cut through the linen beneath, and twice again it swung. The sharp sense of pain shot through every nerve. But at the moment of escape had arrived. At the wave of my hand, my deliverers hurried tumultuously away, with a steady movement, cautious, sidelong, shrinking, and slow. I slid from the embrace of the bandage, and beyond the reach of the scimitar. For the moment, at least, I was free. Free, and in the grasp of the Inquisition. I'd scarcely stepped into the wooden bed of horror upon the stone floor of the prison, and then the motion of the hellish machine ceased and beheld it drawn up by some invisible force, and through the ceiling was the most lesson which was took desperately to heart. My every motion was undoubtedly watched. Free! I had but escaped death in one form of agony, to be delivered unto the worse than death in some other. With that thought, I rolled my eyes nervously around on the barrels of iron that hemmed me in. Something unusual, some change, at first I could not appreciate distinctly, it was obvious, had taken place in the apartment. For many minutes of myself in vain, unconnected conjecture during this period, I become aware for the first time the origin of the sulphurous light which illumined the cell. It proceeded from the fissure about half an inch in width, extending entirely around the prison at the base of the walls, which thus appeared and were completely separated from the floor. I endeavored, but of course in vain. I took through the aperture. As I rose in the attempt of the mystery of the alteration in the chamber, I broke at once upon the understanding I have observed that, although the outlines of the figures upon the walls were sufficiently distinct, yet the colors seemed blurred and indefinite. These colors has now assumed the most momentarily assuming a startling and most intense brilliancy, that gave to the spectral and fiendish portraitures an aspect that might have chilled even firmer nerves than my own. Demon eyes of a wild, ghastly vivacity glared upon me in 1,000 directions where none had been visible before, and gleamed with the lurid luster of fire that I could not force my imagination to regard was unreal. Unreal! Even while I breathed there came to my nostril the breath of vapor of heated iron. A suffocating odor pervaded my prison. A deeper glow settled each moment in the eyes that glared at my agonies. A richer tint of crimson diffused itself in the pictured horrors of blood. I panted. I gasped for breath, and there could be no doubt of the design of my tormentors. Oh, so unrelenting, oh, so demonic of them, of men. I shrank from the glowing metal from the center of the cell, amid the thought of the fiery destruction that impended. The idea of the coolness of the well came over my soul like balm. I rushed to its deadly brink. I threw my straining vision below, and the glare from the enkindled roof illuminated its inmost recesses. Yet for a wild moment did my spirit refuse to comprehend the meaning of what I saw. At length it wrestled its way into my soul. It burned itself in, and upon speaking my shuddering reason, oh, for a voice to speak! Oh, horror! Oh, any horror but this! With a shriek I rushed from the margin and buried my face in my hands, weeping bitterly. The heat rapidly increased, and once again I looked up, shuddering as with a fit of the ague. There had been second change in the cell, and now the change was obviously in the form. As before, as it was in vain that I, at first, endeavored to appreciate or understand what was taking place, but not was I left in doubt. The inquisitorial vengeance had been hurried by my twofold escape. And then there was no more dallying the king of terrors. The room had been square. I saw two of its iron angles were now acute, too consequently obtuse. The fearful indifference quickly increased with the low rumbling or moaning sound. In any instant the apartment had shifted its form into that of a lozenge, but the alteration stopped not here. I neither hoped nor desired it to stop. I could have clasped the red walls to my bosom as a garment of eternal peace. Death, I said, any death but that of the pit. Fool, I might have known that into the pit it was the object of the burning iron to urge me. Could I resist its glow? Or even if that, I could have withstand its pressure. And now, flatter and flatter grew the lozenge, with that rapidity that left me no time for contemplation. Its center, of course, its greatest width, came just over the yawning gulf. I shrank back, but the closing wall pressed me persistently onward. At length, fucking hate you. What the? Bruh! Fucking Ohio skibbity toilet. Ass, I'm trying to read here. I shrank back, but the closing wall pressed me irresistibly onward. At length, for my researched and writhing body, there was no longer an inch of foothold on the firm floor of the prison. I struggled no more, but the agony of my soul found vent in one loud, long, and final scream of despair. I felt I tottered upon the brink. I averted my eyes. There was more. There was a discordant hum of human voices. There was a loud blast as of many trumpets. There was a harsh grating as of 1,000 thunders. The fiery walls rushed back, and an outstretched arm caught my own as I fell. Fainting into the general abyss. Is that of General LaSalle? What? The French army has entered Toledo, and the Inquisition was in the hands of its enemies. The end. Fuck you for only in Ohio's skibbity toilet, quote the Raven. Oh my god. Fuck you, dude. He's yeah, I know, we know. I know that bitch is French. But Jesus Christ. LaSalle mentioned? Yo? God. Speaking of the Raven, let me just pull up that fucking thing. God, if I only... I feel so represented right now. All representation. God, how do you do... I forgot how do you... Suddenly I don't know how to... How do these work? Uh-oh. Hello? Let me just pull up the Raven right now, since, you know, speak of the devil. Speak of the bird. Gosh. Yeah, let's go. I'm sick of her ass. 5 Nuts at Edgar. Wait, what? The Raven. The Raven. Yes. Yeah, I forgot you played Edgar Allan Poe. I just fucking forgot. Not that I care. Hold on. I feel totally represented right now. Anywho, The Raven. Once upon a midnight journey, while I pondered weak and weary over many quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping on my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow, and from the book surcease of sorrow of the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken sad uncertain rustling of each purple curtain filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now to still the beating of my heart I stood repeating, is some visitor entreating entrance of my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This is it, and nothing more. Presently, my soul grew stronger. Sir, said I, or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact that I was napping, so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping, tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened the wide door, darkness there and nothing more. Deep into the darkness peering long, I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence unbroken, and the darkness given no token, and the only word were spoken was whispered, Lenore. This, I whispered, with an echo murmured back at the word Lenore. Merely this and nothing more. Back into the chamber, churning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then, that what thereat is, this mystery explore. Let my heart be still at a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not the minute stopped or stayed he, but with the mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat and nothing more. Even this ebony bird beguiling the sad fancy into smiling, by the grave stern and decorum of countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven though, I said, thou? Shaven thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marveled in its ungainly fowl, to hear discourse so plainly, and though its answers little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as nevermore. But the raven sit lonely on the passed bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word did it outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will never leave me, as my hope have flown before. Then the bird said nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is the only stock in store, caught for some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his song one unburdened bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door, then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking, fancy unto fancy, thinking that this ominous bird of yore, and this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt and ominous bird of yore, meant in croaking nevermore. I sat and engaged guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining, on the cushion's velvet lining that lamplight gloated over, but those velvet violet whining, with the lamplight floating o'er. She shall press, nevermore. Then the methought, what? Of the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled to the tufted floor. Wretched, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite, respite, nepenthe, from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff, of this nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all daunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home of horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm of the Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, I said I, thing of evil, prophet still, of bird and devil. By the heaven that bends above us, by God we both adore. Tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aden, it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels named Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that bird our sign of partaking, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest of the night's plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out of my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting, on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, and his eyes have been seeming of a demon's of that is dreaming, and the lamp lights over him streaming, throw his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out of that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted, nevermore. Level 3 yacht, nevermore. Fuck you, bitch. Yes, gosh, that shit was long. Well, you know. Also, I need to find that other fucking poem. I gave you what you want. I represented you thrice now at this point. Not as long as Lenore. Foul, that's fucking foul. Anyways, I need to find that freaking poem where he, I don't know, something, it's about a girl, forgot. Rip 07. What the fuck, what was that again? I forgot. It's a dead girl. Poem of a dead girl. Yes, Annabelle Lee. yes, Annabelle Lee. Hold on. Let me. Dead. Yeah, she's dead, right? In the poem. Right? No. Listen, listen. I worked on Shakespeare, okay? Anyhow, let me just before my throat goes to like before my throat dies, because I have to go. Ugh. To end this motherfucking thing. The less you know, the less more stuff. Yeah. We're gonna do Annabelle. Is she dead? She's dead for real, right? Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, there we go. That's the reading list. And for the last fucking thing, I'm surprised that I read for 2 hours now. Anywho, just Annabelle by Edgar Allan Poe. It was many and many years ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived, whom you may know by the name of Annabelle Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabelle Lee, with a love that winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that, long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew a cloud chilling my beautiful Annabelle Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, when envying her and me, yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabelle Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can never dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabelle Lee, and the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabelle Lee. And so, all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Ha! There we go. Wait, she dead, right? Wait, what the fuck does he mean by this? I'm gonna get killed at this point. Right? She's dead. Yeah, I was right. Yeah. So yeah, that's for our fucking Halloween season. And that was a little bit scuffed because for some reason my brain does not register the things I want to read. Is it a skill issue? Yeah, of course. But yeah, thank you for coming here in the stream. Quite chaotic, a little bit. There's a lot of a lot of dead people and stuff, and yeah, we know. I mean, that's what you expect for Edgar Allan Poe, right? Anywho, I have to go now because I forgot we have base for Edgar rep. Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah. Expecting rapping at your chamber door. No, that's fucking terrifying. No. How about no? You know. But does it come with someone beatboxing though? I take it. You know. Rapping. So yeah, I have to go now because I have errands to run. And I won't be here tomorrow. Acapella Parrots, good. Acapella Parrots pog. But I have to go now. I have to run some errands and stuff. And I'll be back next. I won't be here tomorrow. But yeah, the next day, the day after that, we're gonna play a little game. And then on Saturday, I won't stream because I will watch a certain fucking film. Wait, hold on. Wait. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I think I forgot my schedule. What do you mean you know? You don't know? I just realized I'm watching 2 films this week. One is free and one is like, horror. Yeah, I think I forgot what. Where are we? Oh no, I lost my sense of time. Great. This day is great. Wait, hold on. What? Oh yeah. Yeah, only the day after. I'm gonna stream the day after, and the rest of the days, I'll just be watching 2 films. One of which is a very, very, very pog one. I mean, both of them will be pretty good, I guess. But I'm a simp. Anyways, goodbye. I have to go. Bye. Hey, that's wrong. I have muted the rain sounds.